Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Trash bags, bloody seats, and a bad haircut. Today, we're going to talk about the evidence behind the state of Connecticut's case against Michelle Troconis, which goes to trial tomorrow. So, happy Wednesday. I don't know about you. I am so glad to be here. It's been a hard week, but I have so been looking forward to tonight and just coming on and talking to y'all about this case. Here on the channel, we are kicking off some intense coverage, hopefully daily coverage of the trial of Michelle Troconis. She is accused of murdering the ex, not quite ex, of her boyfriend, who is also her ex. So it's the ex-girlfriend's conspiracy to murder the ex-wife, who wasn't quite an ex-wife. We'll get into all of that tonight. And we also have a longer video on the case, just giving an overall summary of it, that as soon as this processes, I'll link at the end so you can really understand what the case is all about. Now, the Michelle Troconis is accused of murdering her boyfriend's wife, a mom of 5, Jennifer Dulos. Michelle Troconis's trial is going to be broadcast live on Court TV and Law and Crime. I think some of the most fun and interesting periods we've had here on the channel have been when we followed a case live. So I just can't wait for this. And this case is a doozy. Be sure to subscribe because you don't want to miss the coverage. Now, normally when we cover a case like this, I'd like to go live every day. I like to keep you up to date daily. I'm not sure how that will work this time. Hubby is in the hospital again and had some surgery. I feel pretty sure I can do the usual Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 schedule, but I'm not as sure about the in-between days. If you would, please be sure to check the community page, and I'll try to post if for any reason I can't cover one day, and I'll let you know. Oh, one last thing. Please do hit the like button. It really does help the video with the YouTube algorithm. All right, so let's get started. Here is the case chart I did for y'all, just to kind of give you the lay of the land, the pictures. So it was a spring day in May 2019 in Connecticut. And let me fix one thing here. Okay. And Jennifer Dulos dropped her 5 kids off at school. Now, video footage from her neighbor shows that she came home after she dropped the kids off, but she has never been seen or heard from again. Police began their investigation that evening, and they quickly learned that Jennifer Dulos was in a hot divorce and custody dispute with her husband, Fotis Dulos. Allegations had been thrown back and forth. Jennifer alleged that Fotis was having an affair with Michelle Troconis. And in fact, by the time of the murder, Michelle and Fotis Dulos were living with each other as the divorce dragged on. So police believe that Fotis Dulos murdered his estranged wife, Jennifer, in her own garage and then disposed of the body. But Fotis Dulos will never face justice on this earth because he unalived himself before an important hearing in his case. But the prosecution believes that 2 other people conspired to murder Jennifer, and both of them are very much alive and they are facing criminal charges. Michelle Troconis, the other woman, goes on trial tomorrow. Authorities also believe that Kent Mawhinney, Fotis's close friend and his former attorney, was also involved. The court has not yet set a trial date for him, at least not that I could find. So what I'm going to do today is I want us to go through the arrest warrant affidavit that was filed and get the lay of the land, the picture of what the evidence against Michelle Troconis, the state plans to present, is. What are the things they think show Michelle Troconis was involved? First, that there was a murder, since there is no body. Her Jennifer Dulos's body has never been found, but also not just that there was a murder, but also that Michelle Troconis was a member of the conspiracy to murder Jennifer Dulos. So I'm going to go ahead and share this. Thank you. Little donation to the HLL medical wing. That's funny because we really ought to have our own medical wing. That's very good. Thank you, Marlon. I appreciate that very much. And yes, we definitely need to have our own medical wing. We are regular consumers of the frequent flyers. If only they gave out frequent hospital stayer points, we would really be getting some good benefits. He'd be in the upper suite somewhere being served steak every night. All right, so let's go ahead, and I'm going to share the screen and add. This is what you're seeing now is the information, and then we're going to flip down to the information for the arrest warrant, and we're going to be looking at the affidavit in just a minute. So you can see that bail was set at $2 million, and I highlighted this not because it stayed at $2 million, it dropped to $1.5 million for Michelle Troconis, but I thought it was of interest. She has been out. She has not been in jail awaiting trial. For, I would say, the majority of our cases, the defendant has been in jail awaiting trial, but not in this particular case. Okay, so let's get started. The initial missing person report on May 24th, 2019, NCPD officers responded to the 69 Wells Lane residence, and they went to the 3-bay garage, the center bay of which contained a 2014 Range Rover. They found multiple areas within the garage which presumptively tested positive for blood. They saw spatter stains on the driver's side of the Range Rover and on the garage floor north or left of the Range Rover. Spatter stains are blood stains resulting from airborne blood drops created when an external force is applied to liquid blood. Detectives also noted indications that the scene had been altered by an attempt to clean it. Then the 2017 Chevy Suburban, she had 2 vehicles. And remember, she was living separately from Fotis Dulos. So this is at Jennifer's house. It is not Fotis's house. So the 2017 Chevy Suburban, one of her 2 cars, registered to her, was missing, and it was found by NCPD abandoned at approximately 7 p.m. on Lapham Road, adjacent to the southwest portion of Mawhinney Park in New Canaan. The vehicle was unoccupied. Its running lights were on, and its transmission was left in reverse. Jennifer was not found inside the vehicle or in the surrounding area. Investigators found stained spatter on the passenger side of the vehicle. Now, we talked about this a little bit on Monday when I did a summary of the case to just get us started on the coverage. Jennifer had 2 cars. She had a Range Rover and a Chevy Suburban. The nanny says that Jennifer planned to take the Range Rover for appointments that day. But when the nanny got to the house in the late morning, Jennifer wasn't there and the Chevy Suburban was gone, while the Range Rover, which Jennifer had been going to take, was still sitting in the garage. And the nanny thought, that's odd. But she just assumed Jennifer had changed her mind, and then the nanny just went on with her day. Now, as it would turn out, the garage where the Range Rover was parked was probably the crime scene. There was blood spatter all over it. DNA testing, as we're about to see, showed it was Jennifer's blood. So the most obvious location of the murder of Jennifer Dulos is in her own garage. And her, so let's take a look at what they found when they went inside the home, because we're going to take a look at the DNA results that they found when they went inside the home. So you can see the part I marked as 3. There was a blood light stain there were various blood light stains, and you can see they all tested positive for Jennifer Dulos's blood, except for one. But they all tested positive for that. 2 of them also tested positive for Fotis Dulos. He was the man, still married to Jennifer Dulos, but they were in the very bitter divorce that I mentioned. So Fotis's DNA was on the kitchen sink faucet and on the inside knob or plate of the mudroom door. Now, one of the reasons this is such a powerful piece of evidence for the state is that, according to Fotis Dulos, he had never been inside Jennifer Dulos's house before. According to everyone, he had not been inside the house. So it wasn't a natural, normal thing for his blood to be found there. The only reason the state says that his DNA got in there was that he was lying in wait to kill Jennifer. Now, I presume they will argue that he used gloves to enter the home and then maybe washed up. That's how he got the DNA on the sink faucet. and then left by the mudroom door. That's just a guess. They don't really spell it out in this affidavit. And maybe they're assuming when he left, he didn't have the gloves on anymore. So let's take a look again. I want to show you, these are the central characters: Jennifer Dulos, the victim; Fotis, the husband, soon to be ex-husband; Kent Mawhinney, the attorney; and then also you have again Michelle Troconis, the woman now with Fotis Dulos, living with him with her 10-year-old daughter, and accused now, who will be on trial tomorrow. Okay, but there are two other people. And so we're going to flip back over to our affidavit and talk about two other people. These are not people who are accused of being complicit, of conspiring, but they're important enough characters that they were listened. And by character, I don't mean that disparagingly. I just mean people who are involved and play a role. But the first is Powell Jimmy Innie. Powell Jimmy Innie was a full-time employee of Ford Group, and he worked closely with Dulos. And interestingly, and this, you'll learn more and more about why this is so important, regularly operated a Toyota Tacoma. And then Andreas, and got me on how you say this. If you know anybody with some Greek, help me out here, because I don't know how to say it. So put that in the chat or the comments. I'm going to say Tuziartis, a childhood friend of Fotis Dulos who lived in Greece. So those are two other people who have some tangential involvement. Neither one of them has been charged or accused of having anything to do with the murder, but they were both listed in the affidavit, along with the only three other people: Fotis Dulos, Michelle Troconis, and Kent Mawhinney. So those are the three. Now let's move on a little bit to number 5. We're going to talk a little bit more about that truck, the one that I mentioned. 2001 Toyota Tacoma, a red Toyota Tacoma pickup truck registered to Jimmy Innie's wife, Barbara Jimmy Innie. According to Jimmy Innie, his wife normally drove her own vehicle, and he used the Toyota Tacoma for transportation to and from the Farmington area in connection to his employment by Fotis Dulos' company. During Jimmy Innie's work week, he indicated he was usually provided a Ford Group vehicle to operate. Now, this is going to prove incredibly important, because the truck was registered to Jimmy Innie's wife, and he usually drove it to work. He switched then to a company truck. But Fotis Dulos borrowed his red Toyota Tacoma truck on the day of the murder, and the prosecution says, why? His company had 3 trucks. Fotis Dulos had 3 trucks his company owned. Why did he need his employee's wife's truck? What was the purpose of that? Now, so we'll keep reading down here. Dulos, and we're going to talk now about by now we've finished with that sort of intro, and we're going to talk about, as you can see, the initial contact the police department had with Fotis Dulos. And let's just say that from the get-go, Fotis got off on the wrong foot with the police. Initial contact: Dulos entered the lobby of the New Canaan Police Department. And I'm just going to read through on the highlights. As you can see, I've cut it way down. This was 35 pages. It would take us quite some time to go through every bit. So I'm trying to just give you the basic facts, and I've left some out just because there's not enough time to do it all. So Dulos entered the lobby nearly 3 hours after his initial expected arrival. Now, this is the day after Michelle Troconis has gone missing. So the police found out about it the night before, and they are going to be looking all day for, where is she? Why is she disappeared? What happened to her? They have no idea. Her almost ex-husband is going to come in and talk to them to help them supposedly find out about where she is. And he's 3 hours late. And then they say his attorney, Jacob Pytranker, entered the lobby and announced to police that Dulos would be providing no interview and that he and Dulos would be leaving. Detective Allegro spoke up to ask Dulos, is that your phone? And Dulos responded affirmatively. Detective Allegro asked for the unlock code, and which Dulos gave him, strangely. And then Detective Allegro placed the phone into airplane mode. And the attorney then objects. The attorney says, you don't have a search warrant. You can't take that. And Pytranker asserted that the police had no grounds to seize the cell phone because they had no warrant. Detectives acknowledged that a SSW would be sought, a search warrant, and that the cell phone would not be searched until a lawful SSW had been issued. Their actions were restricted to the securing of the cell phone and the prevention of potential destruction of evidence contained within the phone. So they're saying, we're not taking your phone. We're not going to look at it. We're just putting it in airplane mode, which we all remember was something SLED did not do with Maggie's phone during Alec Murdaugh's trial case and investigation, and that created a real problem. So here's what the police are thinking. He's late. He's not cooperating. He doesn't show any desire to help find his estranged wife, Jennifer, even though they were married for years, and she's the mother of 5 children of his. And he doesn't seem to be showing concern that she's gone. And now I want to think for just a minute about the phone. It's interesting because on the one hand, it was very wise to put it in the lock mode and to secure it. But on the other hand, they didn't have the warrant. I don't have any doubt that there would have been a battle over whether or not they had the right to take the phone as they did. With Michelle Troconis, she fought a similar battle. They came to the house with a search warrant. They did not have a search warrant that included Michelle Troconis' phone. She was living with Fotis Dulos at the time. And they took her phone anyway without a warrant and said, well, we'll get a warrant. They went back, got a warrant, but she won that fight. And the court is going to eliminate evidence from her cell phone. That's not going to be permitted because it was taken without her permission. Did they look at it before they got the warrant? I don't know. I don't know the details on that. But in any event, this probably would have been a battle too. And now we're going to hear evidence about the infamous trip around Hartford, Connecticut. Fotis Dulos was driving a pickup truck with Michelle in the seat beside him, Michelle Troconis, and throwing out trash bags all over Hartford, Connecticut in different trash cans, a bag here, a bag there, this trash can, that trash can. And all of that looked highly suspicious to the police. They thought it was extremely strange that he was doing that. Now, he was driving not the red Tacoma anymore, but he was driving a different black pickup truck. And law enforcement did, frankly, some impressive work finding where his truck went and then snapping up video from local businesses and houses to see his truck as it moved through. And what they found was pretty shocking. Let's go ahead and read on about what they found. So a cell phone provided information that Dulos' handset was in the area of Albany Avenue in Hartford during the 7 o'clock hour of the day that Jennifer Dulos went missing. And the footage on Albany Avenue showed a large, dark-colored pickup truck consistent with the 2014 Ford Raptor registered to Ford Group traveling in the area on the day she went missing at approximately 7:40 p.m. C4 located, and that's Capital City Command Center, they say that just above, located a male wearing a light-colored shirt, dark pants, and ball cap, and a female passenger in the Ford Raptor was shown on surveillance and subsequently identified as Dulos' girlfriend, Michelle Troconis. C4 mapped out Dulos' movements as he deposited multiple black-colored plastic garbage bags into several trash receptacles during the evening of 5/24. Several plastic bags can be seen in the rear bed of the pickup. At this point, the truck travels through a portion of city streets. Let me make sure. Yep. Okay. Sorry. Double checking. I can't see all my screens at once. I have 3 I need to see and only 2 I can see at a time. So the Ford Raptor reemerges. Let me go back up. Several plastic bags can be seen in the rear bed of the pickup. At this point, the truck travels through a portion of city streets not covered by surveillance cameras for approximately 7 minutes. And the state is going to argue trash bags were being thrown out. They just don't have video. And the Ford Raptor reemerges. A male gets out of the driver's seat, grabs a black plastic bag, and places it into a trash receptacle on the sidewalk. the camera angle shows the rear bed of the truck is now largely empty of bags. The driver conducts a U-turn to travel westbound. The rear bed of the truck is seen to hold only one plastic bag. And then the male emerges from the driver's seat, retrieves the last garbage bag while standing to the rear of the truck and discards the bag into the trash can. And more video shows Dulos remove what appeared to be a large, rigid object from the rear of the Ford Raptor and lean it up against a building. The object was consistent with the appearance of a WeatherTech brand rear cargo liner determined to be missing from Jennifer's 2017 Chevrolet Suburban. C4 video also showed an unidentified person removing what appeared to be a light-colored piece of material containing a large blood-like stain. This item appeared consistent with one of two small camping pillows, which Jennifer's nanny, Lauren Almeida, reported were missing from the garage storage shelves at the 69 Wells Lane crime scene. That's Jennifer's house. Investigators subsequently identified and interviewed the homeless male who told investigators he had seen what he described as a bloody pillow, but he had not taken the item. And again, notice the detail in the investigation that's been done here. I mean, the detail, they even interviewed homeless people nearby. They were looking in great detail, and they're pulling out items that they believe show a connection between Fotis Dulos and the murder of Jennifer Dulos. So law enforcement says it's going to be able to prove that there were bloody items inside the bags and that the blood was a DNA match to Jennifer Dulos. So let's read a little bit further. Detectives checked trash receptacles shown on surveillance and recovered garbage bags that were consistent with those black garbage bags, and what appeared to be cut clothing and undergarments with a blood-like substance, plastic zip ties containing blood-like substance, other items and household goods such as kitchen sponge with blood-like stains, and other household trash items. And notice the DNA that they found. And this is critical for Michelle Troconis' case. So they found a lot of matches to Jennifer Dulos. You can see in that chart in the middle column results, Jennifer, Jennifer, Jennifer. But there were 3 that had matches to either Fotis or, very importantly, Michelle Troconis. There was a black garden glove that where the inside of it, not just the outside, but the inside had a DNA match to Fotis Dulos. Then there were plastic garbage bags where 2 had been taped together with black tape, and the DNA matched Jennifer Dulos and Michelle Troconis. That's really important because it puts her in, it connects her to the plastic bag that they believe was used in the murder or cleanup of the murder of Jennifer Dulos. And then thirdly, the swabbing of the bag opening and separate bag portion, I believe this would be a different bag, had a DNA match to Jennifer and Fotis Dulos, both, as well as to Michelle Troconis. So all of those are going to be really important. We're going to have a lot of DNA evidence quite clearly during the course of the case. Now, this is a super interesting section. The recovery of the altered license plates. I want to read a little bit about this. C4 surveillance video also showed Dulos placing a large white-colored item into a storm drain at the intersection of Albany Avenue and Adams Street. Detectives and Metropolitan District Commission personnel responded to the intersection and accessed the drain. A large white-colored FedEx envelope was removed from the drain and secured by detectives. The envelope was found to contain 2 Connecticut passenger plates, which initially appeared to read 5. Here, it's like a test for your vision, right? 5T6WBU. Upon closer inspection, detectives discovered the plate had been altered using what appeared to be blue tape and a clear adhesive. A collect NCIC check of the plate, as it appeared to read, yielded no information. When detectives determined the actual plates were 516WDJ, the check of the actual alphanumeric listed the plate as canceled on a 2007 Chevrolet Suburban registered to none other than Fotis Dulos. So in other words, what they're saying is that I mean, just think how remarkable it is that law enforcement found this. It was dumped in a storm drain in a city miles away from where the crime occurred. It's a miracle, really, that they found this saw him dumping it on this videotape, got that videotape fast enough before it was erased over, and then saw all of this. So it's pretty important evidence that the license plate had been altered using duct tape to make it look like it read with a different number, apparently pretty thoroughly, because even the police ran the wrong number at first. And then when they peeled that off and saw what the real number was, they realized actually this is an old license plate of Fotis Dulos's. So now we are about to get to some of the most controversial evidence in the case. And let's go ahead and read this. This is what the state is calling the alibi scripts. The day after Troconis's first interview, Michelle Troconis's, the crime van detectives were executing a search warrant when they at 4 Jefferson Crossing. That's where Dulos lived, Fotis Dulos, when they located a set of handwritten notes. These documents came to be referred to by investigators as the alibi script. They were confirmed by Troconis to be her own handwriting and that of Dulos. It was an outline of the activities of Troconis and Dulos for the dates of the murder and the next day, laid out in approximately hourly increments. It was nearly identical to the information provided by Troconis in her first interview, and in her second 2 interviews, her account of those dates diverged from the alibi script, particularly when confronted with evidence. She stated that the family attorney, and this is her explanation for why this was found in the house, this description of what had happened, that the family attorney, Jacob Pytranker, had instructed Dulos to write out a precise timeline of his actions on Wednesday, 5/22/19, the date of his last visitation with his children. And that Pytranker specifically told Dulos to record whether or not he had entered Jennifer's home, and Fotis goes, "No, I did not go in the house." So a couple of important things about that. What the prosecution's thought is, why are Fotis and Michelle writing out hour by hour what they did on the day of the crime and the next day? The prosecution has come up with a name, a fancy name, the alibi script. And they're arguing the reason for this was they wanted to get their story straight. In order to do that, they were trying to make sure they had the right story because they wanted to cover up their crimes. Now, Michelle's team is going to say, that's ridiculous. We were just doing what the attorney told us to do, which was write down what had happened before our memories faded and we didn't remember anymore. Now, both of those are plausible. We will learn more at trial. We do have some more clues about what the prosecutor will argue. One fascinating thing is that Michelle apparently admitted that Fotis said he'd never been in Jennifer's house before. That's one of the prosecution's most important points. As I mentioned earlier, it's some of the strongest evidence tying him to the crime scene, because there's no explanation for why his DNA is in the house if, in fact, he admits he never went there. And there are more witnesses who are going to say he had never been in the house before. Now, there was a situation where he had a picnic. Let's see. Let me see if it's right here. I'll just tell you about it if it's not. Okay. There was a situation where he had a picnic with the kids just 3 days before at Jennifer's house in the backyard. So it would have been pretty easy to say, I went in to use the bathroom, or, the kids spilled apple juice on me and I went in the kitchen to clean up. But it sounds like even under prompting from his attorney, he said, no, he was never in the house. That actually hurt him, although maybe that does mean, it makes it seem like he was telling the truth. Now, the prosecution is going to argue this was not just remembering what happened, because it leaves out really critical key facts. Let's go ahead and read some of those. Detectives pointed out that in recording their timelines, both she and Dulos had chosen to omit the trip to dump trash in Hartford, to which Troconis replied, "I know." When Troconis was told this looked bad, that she and Dulos had failed to record potentially incriminating information, Troconis replied, "Okay, I know." Troconis denied that Dulos had told her to leave certain items out of the script. She reported Dulos had told her to write out the highlights of her day's events. When asked if Dulos was dictating what story Troconis should tell police, she responded, "Well, obviously was for me to say it, but he was trying to be more accurate, but with a lie." With a lie. That's what I'm saying. He was trying to fill things that I don't remember with things that it wasn't true. Now, this is really confusing. One of the key arguments that the prosecution is going to make against Michelle Troconis is that she changed her story and that she hid things. They interviewed her 3 times, and they when the next few things we're going to read, they took the interviews and broke them out. This is what she said first time, this is what she said in the second interview, and this is what she said in the third. But this is particularly very strange and puzzling language. Instead of saying, oh, well, we hadn't finished the timeline yet, that's why we didn't have that. Or we stopped at 6 p.m. because we knew she had disappeared by then. She just says Fotis told her to leave it off, and then makes some strange comments about lying to be more accurate, which is just difficult to understand. So the defense will probably talk about this at trial, but right now it just seems puzzling and strange. All right, so let's keep reading. All right, so these are the next interviews these are the ones that are broken down. And one of the first things they're going to talk about is whether or not Fotis Dulos had an alibi from the time of the murder. So here's what she said in interview number 1. She says she and Dulos woke up, this is the day of the murder, at their residence at 6:40 a.m., showered, were intimate, and that is inconsistent with a forensic download of Dulos's cell phone. So that's one of the pieces of evidence. And then, so she was pressed on that, and she said, well, maybe he wasn't home the entire morning, but she still was giving him an alibi between 6:40 and 8:15 a.m. But in her second interview, she was asked, okay, was he there at 6:40? And she said he was there. Yes, he was in the house when Troconis was told investigators had evidence showing Dulos was not in the house. She said, okay. Troconis proceeded to cover her face with her hands, wipe her eyes, and then tried to change the subject and acquiesced that she did not see Dulos on that day until between 1 and 2 p.m. And then Troconis also conveyed Dulos had told her, sometimes I hope she disappears. That Dulos was speaking of Jennifer, and said, Fotis was speaking of Jennifer and said, sometimes I hope she disappears. Now, that's some huge evidence because, of course, coincidentally, right, that's exactly what did happen. Now, in interview number 3, investigators asked Troconis if Dulos was home when she shut off her alarm at 6:40 a.m., and she began shaking her head left to right as she responded no, and ultimately admitted she had not seen Dulos in the bedroom, in the shower, or anywhere else in the house that morning until noontime when Dulos called up to her for lunch. So all of that is going to be used by the state to say she doesn't know what her story is, and it was very inconsistent, and therefore you can't believe her, and she must have been covering something up. That's what they're going to argue. Now let's keep reading. Troconis reported that Dulos was in the 4-group office. And all right, sorry, little preface. The second critical evidence that the state says that Michelle Troconis changed is whether or not Kent Mawhinney and Fotis Dulos met at the house that morning, and whether Fotis had a cell phone. And that's going to be tied into this next section, those 2 points. Troconis reported that Dulos was in the 4-group office section of the residence conducting a business meeting with attorney Kent Mawhinney at 8:15 a.m. that morning. She ultimately told 3 different versions of this meeting. First, she said she saw Mawhinney and Dulos both sitting at a table talking with one another. Later, Troconis indicated she only heard Mawhinney and Dulos talking, but never saw the 2 of them together sitting at the table. And finally, she reported she only heard Mawhinney talking, but she didn't see or hear Dulos. And Mawhinney admitted, and this is Mawhinney talking, no longer Troconis, admitted to investigators he was at the 4-group office that morning, but he said he never saw Troconis. So a lot of confusion in there. In her second interview, said she continued to maintain that Dulos was present in the office at 8:20, 8:30 range. When asked if Dulos would normally carry his cell phone with him, Troconis said yes and no, but a lot yes. Troconis answered that it would be unusual for Dulos to be without his phone even for a few hours. She left open the possibility that Dulos had left his cell phone behind accidentally, but when questioned, she reported Dulos had not told her he forgot his cell phone. Now, her third interview, she now said that she noticed that Dulos' cell phone was sitting on the table, and she found it was unusual that it was sitting there on the table, but she was unwilling to say he wasn't there. She would just say she didn't see him that morning. And this is where the call from Andreas with the last name I cannot pronounce, that's where this comes in. Dulos' phone record showed an incoming call that morning at 8:24 a.m. They say the call was prearranged with his friend Andreas, who lives in Greece. And she continued to claim no knowledge that Dulos did not have a cell phone that day in interview number 2. But in interview number 3, she says Dulos' cell phone was sitting there on the four-group office, in the four-group office. She heard it ringing. She picked up the phone, and she spoke briefly to this childhood friend of Dulos's who lives in Greece. And the cell phone data shows a 17-second phone call. And she says, I'm pretty sure it was Andreas's voice. So lots of confusion in there, lots of uncertainty. Initially, she talked about the interview involving Mawhinney and Fotis. That sort of unraveled. It seemed to be there's no real alibi for Fotis anymore. And a lot of it was just super conflicting. Now we're going to talk about Troconis' alibi. That was Fotis' alibi, which seemed to fairly much fall apart under the questioning. This is Troconis' alibi. She left Jefferson Crossing on the day of the murder at approximately 9:10 a.m. and dropped off an item to a friend, thereby providing herself with an in-person alibi before traveling north to the Simsbury Stop and Shop, where she took photographs of herself and a store robot, providing a secondary alibi. And then on her way home, Troconis stopped by an additional address in West Simsbury, where she met with a different friend, providing a third alibi. In her second interview, that was interview 1, interview 2, without prompting, Troconis provided a description of the clothing she was wearing at that shop to help investigators identify her on store surveillance. And then in her third interview, she grudgingly admitted that portions of the alibi scripts were factually inaccurate and that she had nonetheless provided these falsehoods to police as fact. Now, there are 2 different ways that you can look at this whole issue with Michelle Troconis' alibi. Michelle Troconis says, I have an alibi, and you can see me on video. I met with people who will say I did. Now, the state says, yeah, well, you made sure you had an alibi because you knew a murder was going to take place. So Michelle Troconis' response is going to be, look, you're never satisfied. If I don't have an alibi, you're going to say I did it. And if I do have an alibi, you're going to say I made it up because I knew I needed an alibi. I can't win. And that is a good point. I mean, that's a point the defense is going to raise. As to that last sentence in there, that she admitted that parts of the alibi scripts were factually inaccurate and gave them to police as facts anyway, that could be huge or it could be not that big. We really have to see that play out at trial to know what that means. But it definitely sounds interesting. All right, so Troconis reported Dulos called her on her phone to tell her they both had to go over, and this is the day of the murder. Now, the prosecution believes that Jennifer Dulos has already been killed, and it's unclear where her body is or what's been done with it. But later that afternoon, early afternoon, Troconis reported Dulos called her to tell her they both had to go over to 80 Mountain Spring Road, which was a property being developed by Fotis Dulos' company, to clean the house in preparation for a client meeting the next morning. Troconis had to bring a vacuum, a Swiffer mop, paper towels, Clorox spray, and garbage bags. Troconis indicated that at approximately 3 p.m. she returned to Jefferson Crossing, but she drove a different vehicle. She explained the way the Jeep was parked, it was easier to drive the Suburban, And then Troconis began cleaning windows. She admitted she didn't really do cleaning. She said she started to clean windows, but gave up because the house was too big. So Michelle took a bunch of cleaning supplies. Now, the prosecution's view is going to be cleaning supplies. Wasn't that convenient? Because that's also what you could use to clean up a body or a crime scene. And why are you, the girlfriend of a multi-millionaire businessman, cleaning this house owned by his business? Surely his business hires people regularly to clean homes. And then you admit that you don't actually end up doing any cleaning anyway. So then there's the whole switching cars thing. So the prosecution is going to say, look, all of this just looks sketchy. Now, when Troconis was told that Dulos had killed his wife and involved her in the cleanup, she responded by saying, that's like even worse. I hate him because of that. Affiant Kimball told Troconis, he got you in trouble. Troconis replied, but I was cleaning the house. I wasn't cleaning Jennifer, which is rather disgusting. During interviews 1 and 2, Troconis repeatedly told investigators she had been cleaning windows while at 80 Mountain Spring Road. During the third interview, Troconis began claiming she had been cleaning bathrooms. So these are just some weird comments. Prosecution is going to say this is more inconsistency by Michelle Troconis. My guess is that her counsel is going to argue that some of this inconsistency is due to the language barrier. She's from Venezuela. English is not her first language, and it would be my guess that that's probably one of the things they're going to argue. All right, Troconis indicated that when Jimmy Innie arrived at 80 Mountain Spring Road at approximately 5 p.m., she and Dulos had been standing up against the Toyota Tacoma's passenger side. Fotis and I were against the car, the Tacoma. Fotis was like behind me, like physical contact. Jimmy Innie arrives. I think Powell or Fotis says, I didn't see anything, or we weren't doing anything. I think something like a joke. When asked to explain her meaning, and Troconis answered, like, yeah, we were making. Troconis appeared to be saying that Jimmy Innie's arrival interrupted Dulos and Troconis from engaging in sex alongside the passenger side of the Toyota. Dulos came inside looking for paper towels, saying he'd spilled something in the vehicle, spilled coffee, and then on the paper towel, whatever was on it was brown in color, according to Troconis, and she said it didn't smell like coffee. So again, we got a bunch of really confusing stuff. The affidavit says Dulos drove a Chevy Suburban and Troconis drove a Jeep Cherokee to this property. So I wasn't clear as to how the red Toyota Tacoma ended up there at all. I mean, it isn't because Jimmy Innie drove it there, because it says he drove up while Fotis and Troconis were having relations against the Toyota Tacoma. So was Jennifer's body in the vehicle while they were doing that? Were there trash bags with waste product in there? It's all very strange, and there aren't any real answers to that. And then Fotis getting paper towels to clean up coffee that didn't smell like coffee. It's just very confusing. We'll just have to wait and see how this comes out at trial. So now we are going to cover again the infamous Hartford throwing out the bloody trash bags incident. Here is Michelle's story about it. Okay, interview number 1. Dulos stopped and we stopped. He throws something from the back. And by the way, she confirmed something really big for the state. She confirmed that the people in the video were, in fact, Fotis Dulos and Michelle Troconis. So she confirmed that. They don't have to prove that now. She admits that. She says that Fotis threw something from the back, a bag, or I don't know what. I wasn't really paying attention. She also said that there was a screenshot that she identified Troconis as the male. She identified the truck and identified that she was the female passenger. Detectives asked her, okay, what was in the back of the vehicle? And she said, I don't know. I wasn't looking. So that is again, much confusion. She has now confirmed something huge for the state, something really important, saves the state from having to do that. Her argument is going to be she didn't have anything to do with it. And I will say this, on the video that I saw, the little excerpts of video, it's always Fotis getting out and throwing something away. It's not Michelle. So let's keep reading. All right. Now, and here is a strange fact. Investigation determined that on 5/29/19, this is 5 days after Jennifer Dulos disappeared, Dulos and Troconis together shuttled Jimmy Innie's Toyota Tacoma pickup truck, his truck, to Russell Speeder's car wash in order to have the vehicle thoroughly cleaned and detailed. And then, while it's being detailed, Dulos gets into the Chevrolet Yukon being driven by Michelle, and the two of them travel to the law offices of attorney Andrew Bowman, who currently represents Troconis. According to the affidavit at that time, that was who represented her anyway. I don't know. I'm not sure who her attorney is right now. So this is a weird fact. They're detailing this Toyota Tacoma, which is not their car, and they drive straight from there to meet with an attorney. Especially interesting since, as I say, it wasn't even their car. Now, we're going to keep going with that red Toyota Tacoma because that's a big piece of evidence for the state. During the search warrant execution, Jimmy Innie told detectives that the seats which were installed in the Toyota were different from the seats which had been in the truck on May 24th. The results indicated Jennifer Dulos's blood was found on the passenger seat of the vehicle. And then we'll stop right there for a minute. So the seats are a really big piece of evidence. Jimmy Innie said Fotis just insisted that he replace the seats for not a lot of reason that he could see. The police did find the old ones. They had Jennifer Dulos's blood on them. And then there's the bike. This is not just an ordinary bike. This is a French bike, vintage, that he had in his childhood. Powell Jimmy Innie told investigators he was aware that Dulos owned an older model black or brown bicycle. Dulos had told Jimmy Innie the bike was made in France and was his childhood bicycle. When detectives showed Troconis photographs of the interior of the Ford Jefferson Crossing garage taken on June 3rd, she indicated Dulos's bicycle was missing from the photo. Troconis pointed out the empty hook where Dulos's bike normally hanged. Evidence recovered from the Albany Avenue trash receptacles contained a logo consistent with a vintage Merci brand bicycle. On the day of Jennifer's disappearance, residential surveillance footage on Weed Street, New Canaan, showed an individual dressed in a hooded sweatshirt and dark clothing riding a bicycle consistent with Dulos's bike toward Jennifer's residence. And so what the police believe is that Fotis took a bike over to Jennifer's in order to kill her. And they believe that this is the bike he used to get over there. And it was an identifiable bike. It wasn't just a standard Walmart issue bicycle. This was something really specific from France, a vintage one, and it was very unique. And they believe they have photographs of it. All right, video from a residential surveillance system showed that bike had curled ram horn handlebars common on vintage 10-speed bicycles, and that Dulos owned a vintage bicycle matching this description, all of which is evidence that they're going to use. All right, we're going to touch really briefly on Kent Mawhinney and his story. I'm not going to go much into this. He's not on trial right now. It's going to be Michelle Troconis's trial. And his trial will be at a later date. He's being charged, but no, he will not actually be tried in this. Okay, so Kent Mawhinney stated that there was, and I've already been through this, sort of that prearranged meeting, and he had a lot of contradiction. First, he said, okay, I didn't see Dulos that morning, and I didn't have a meeting with him. And then in his second interview, he said, okay, yeah, I had a prearranged meeting with him, but I never saw him. So a little bit of confusion there. He also told a story which law enforcement did not buy about how he had received a concussion from a fall down a set of stairs on the day after Jennifer disappeared. And he had to replace his cell phone. And, coincidentally, of course, his memory was probably harmed as well. And he was asked if he would know why Dulos would have contacted him while dumping evidence into trash receptacles in Hartford, Connecticut. He said he didn't remember that, say concussion, and did not know why Fotis would call him while he was disposing of evidence. So that's just some of the stuff that will come out with Kent Mawhinney. Now, Jimmy Innie provided multiple voluntary, and let me stop for a minute and talk about, you saw that at the beginning of the affidavit, Jimmy Innie was mentioned. And Jimmy Innie theoretically could have been involved in this. If there was blood from Jennifer Dulos in the vehicle he normally drove to work, maybe he's the murderer, right? That's one of the things. But the prosecution is going to say throughout this why they don't think he was involved. They say he provided multiple voluntary interviews, that Dulos told him he'd get in trouble if he talked to police because Jimmy Innie had only a green card. So that's why he was afraid to go to police. Now, Dulos asked Jimmy Innie if he could move Jimmy Innie's truck to 80 Mountain Spring Road because the truck was leaking oil. So I guess that is why it was waiting at 80 Mountain Spring Road on that particular day. Remember, I said I wasn't really sure about why, but that would be why. Jimmy Innie then drove to 80 Mountain Spring Road to see if Dulos was there. He needed to get a key, I believe it was. When he arrived, he saw both Troconis and Dulos in the driveway. He reported they looked surprised to see him. They were not holding any cleaning products. There were no products near the vehicle. So he's not didn't buy the whole cleaning routine. When they arrived, Jimmy Innie realized the sole key to his Toyota, which minutes before had been seen by him protruding from the passenger door, was now gone. Dulos asked Jimmy Innie if he wanted to take the Ford Raptor home, but Jimmy Innie told Dulos he wanted to put his dirt bike in the bed of his Toyota and take it home. Dulos called Troconis and told her to bring back the key, which she did. Jimmy Innie went to his truck to get a toolbox, saw a red pail with a blue hoodie inside it, and they're going to hook that back to the person on the bike. Remember, Jimmy Innie didn't recognize them, so he left them in the laundry room. And Dulos began telling Jimmy Innie he should replace the seats or sell the entire truck. So on May 30th, Dulos told Jimmy Innie he should go to a junkyard to buy replacement seats for the Toyota and pay cash for them, and he would reimburse whatever the cost was to Jimmy Innie in cash. Dulos also told Jimmy Innie that during future phone calls, he was to avoid using the word seats and should instead refer to the seats as hardware. Apparently, it was more difficult to find than it sounded like, so Dulos appeared angry that he had failed to find replacement seats. And Dulos told Jimmy Innie, let me take a sip of water so I can keep going. Although we're getting near the end, it's a good time to put in questions if you have. So Dulos appeared angry that he had failed to find these replacement seats. And Dulos then told Jimmy Innie that on Mother's Day, he had given Jennifer a hug, and he'd also held Jennifer's cat, and he was worried that one of Jennifer's hairs could be found in the Tacoma, and that was why this should be, the seats needed to be replaced. So what Jimmy Innie finally did was he took Dulos's wrecked Porsche, and after removing the Tacoma seats, he substituted in Porsche seats. But instead of getting rid of the old seats, he kept them in his garage, quote, in case the police ever wanted to take them, and then he voluntarily offered them to the police. He also voluntarily provided his cell phone, and they found certain items had been deleted. Again, something that could make him look guilty. And I would imagine he is going to be someone Michelle Troconis' team is going to point to. But it is notable that on 5/28/19, that's 4 days after Jennifer disappeared, Dulos had physical possession of Jimmy Innie's unlocked cell phone in order to, quote, check his call history. We also have a little bit of information from the nanny, Lauren Almeida. She was a full-time nanny. She talked about, remember, there was that visitation where Dulos was in the backyard with the children, and could that have been sometime when he entered the house and maybe got his DNA in the house? But she said, absolutely not. That didn't happen. She took Jennifer Dulos and Miss Almeida took steps to ensure that didn't happen, as Jennifer was strictly opposed to Dulos ever entering the home. They placed the food out on the rear patio table, and they locked the rear mudroom door to prevent him from entering the kitchen. So they're saying he wasn't there. He was not in the house. She arrived, the nanny did, that morning of Jennifer's disappearance, found Jennifer's handbag on the floor in the doorway between the mudroom and the kitchen. She found Jennifer's unopened granola bar and mug of tea on the counter. She washed Jennifer's mug, and she noticed the paper towel roll near the sink needed replacement. So she went to the pantry for a new roll and found there were only 2 in there. And that made no sense to her. She found it, quote, incredibly strange because the night before she had put a brand new pack of 12 in the pantry. And she said, I sat there and wondered what had happened last night that they used 10 rolls of paper towels. At 12:43, she started messaging Jennifer. She did it more than once. No response, no response, no response. Then she said, by 4 p.m., she called, went to voicemail, and she said, in the 7 years I worked for Jennifer, I never, ever had a hard time reaching her, never had an issue with her phone being off. So when she found out that Jennifer didn't show up for the children's orthodontist appointment at 4:40, she said her initial reaction was, my first thought was that Fotis did something. So, and then she said, Fotis never asked me how Jennifer was. She called to say what had happened. Fotis never asked me how Jennifer was doing the day previously or when I had last heard from her or showed any concern about the fact that Jennifer was missing. Fotis did ask how the kids were doing. So she clearly was on, if you had to pick a camp between the two, she clearly was on Jennifer's side and not on Fotis's. So the nanny's going to be a really important witness. She sets a very human scene. The paper towel's been gone. That's a very interesting fact. The fact that Jennifer wasn't answering her phone, and that was very unusual. And all of that's going to help. I don't think the state is probably going to be able to get in her comment that her first thought was that Fotis must have done something, because that's just her opinion, and that's really for the jury to decide. That's my guess. And then I did think it was a little odd that Jennifer's unopened granola bar and mug of tea were on the counter, because the blood was in the garage, which suggested that she was killed right when she came home. I mean, there are tons of explanations that are possible, like Fotis came out and confronted her, and so she ran into the garage, or after she got everything ready to take the kids to school, she was about to eat, realized she didn't have time. Everybody was running late, so she just decided, I'll eat it when I get back. I just noticed it does seem a little odd. I'm curious how that will all be explained. So I'm going to skip a little bit here for the sake of time, all the green, and go straight down here. Sydney Streeter will be another witness, most probably. She was the observer. She also confirms that Dulos never came into the residence. That's another thing that she is going to say and confirm. We won't go into detail. I will just say that according to the prosecution, Fotis Dulos was in a lot of financial difficulty. He had a lot of financial troubles, and they believe one motive could have been to access the trust accounts of about $2 million for the children. Let me pull it. Oh, thank you, Camilla. I appreciate that. She's sending positive vibes to me and to the family. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So let's see what else. And Dulos was, I think there'll be a fair amount about his financial difficulties. I am sure Michelle will try to keep that out. It's not relevant to her, but that's all going to be relevant to whether or not he had a motivation or a need to kill her. So that's what I think what the prosecution is going to say. Okay, so we will pull that out, and I will get into some questions. Let me make this big. Okay. So I think the charges ultimately that Michelle is facing are conspiracy to commit murder, evidence tampering, and hindering the prosecution. And I think we are all going to really enjoy this case. I mean, I think it's going to be really fascinating. It's a case that's been pending for years, and it's hard fought. There are a lot of conflicts about the evidence, and it reaches a different stage with Michelle Troconis. Maybe with Fotis, there was a little more evidence, but now they've got to pull it down to Michelle. How will it work? What will happen? We are going to follow the trial, and we'll be able to see that. So I really think that's going to be really interesting. Maynard Clark asked me a question about Kent Mawhinney's trial. I was not able to find a set trial date for him yet. He's been having hearings. My guess is it hasn't been set yet because I couldn't find anything specific on that. Beth wanted to ask me about New Canaan being 2 hours from Hartford. How long between the suspected time of the murder and the time that the red truck was seen in Hartford? I think they said about 6:40 it was seen in Hartford, and she would have been murdered more like 8 in the morning, maybe 8 to 10. And then in the afternoon was when Michelle Troconis and Fotis Dulos were seen at the house at 80, what was it? I forgot the name of the street or the name of the house, but whatever it was, where they were seen next to the Toyota Tacoma. And so I think there was plenty of time for that. But that's really interesting that New Canaan is 2 hours from Hartford, which makes it even more remarkable that that Michelle has admitted they're the ones on the videos, and that the police found those videos and even found a video showing dumping the license plates into the gutter on the side there. That's amazing. Into the drain pipe. That's like really amazing that they found all that. That was some amazing, impressive detective work is what I would say. Maynard also wanted to know, are there any seemingly innocent key persons? I would say, Maynard, the police believe that Jimmy Innie is an innocent key person in the case. And so at this point, the police have worked hard to stress that they don't believe he was involved in the murder and that he tried to help them. He is somebody that I would think Michelle Troconis is probably going to point some fingers to. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see that and maybe say they did that. Yes, WebFan pointed out that Jennifer Dulos's aunt was Liz Claiborne of the fashion house. And so I gather that at least that side of the family had some money, and it appears Jennifer Dulos's family did as well. I don't know if they were connected. Denise Pelton wants to send a message to Mama Pinks that we miss her and need her back. I certainly will. I certainly will tell her that. Thank you for pointing that out. All right. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. We're going to be following this. I can't say for sure if I'll be able to go tomorrow. I know for sure I'll see you Friday at 7. Be sure to subscribe if you would, and check the community page, and I'll do some communication about what we're going to do, since with hubby in the hospital, it's a little more touch and go as to exactly what I can and can't do time-wise. But it's going to be a great case. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. I want to say thank you again to Marlon and to Camilla. Thank you very much. I appreciate your super chats. And thanks to Marlon for moderating. We'll check on Mama Pinks and hope I got an email from her earlier, so I think she's doing fine, but we'll double check on how she's doing. And thank you to all of you who watch the videos, who subscribe, who hit the like button. It means a great deal, and I really appreciate it. I'll see you for sure on Friday and possibly tomorrow night.